Welcome to episode 41 of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Today we're exploring Peru with our special guest Ariana, who called Peru home for years and knows the country inside out. If you're planning your first trip to Peru, don't miss the expert advice on making the most of your journey. Hi and welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Collins, who with my expert guests will take you on a weekly journey to destinations around the globe, providing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, practical tips and more to help you plan your next travel adventure. Hi everybody, I'm thrilled to have Ariana join us on the podcast today. Ariana's story is one of spontaneity, adventure and falling in love with Peru's mountains, culture and history. We'll start by learning about how she came to call Peru home and then dive into invaluable trips for first-time visitors, from managing altitude to planning your itinerary, avoiding common pitfalls and even what foods to try. Ariana has it all covered. So let's get started. So I kind of wanted to know about your background, and I was interested to see that you did the kind of travel and things. So you're Australian? Are you from Perth or?
Yeah, well, I'm living in the town where I grew up, the village, like a village. So it's remote. There's 300 people in the town. We don't call them villages, but yeah, I live 20 kilometres away from my mum and my brother. So I came back to the hometown, but spent 20 years travelling. So
So tell me about that. So when did you decide that you wanted to go and do? Because I grew up between the UK and South Africa, and after university, the first thing I wanted to do was get on a plane and go back to Europe. So I guess you got that similar kind of travel bug and decided, right, I'm going.
Yeah, no, kind of. I had a career, and I was I was in politics, and So you got to go back. My dad's American, and so when I was growing up in the 1980s, we used to go to America every second year. And Dad would always go like, let's go via somewhere else. So we would go to other places, like we, went to Europe and then we'd go to America and visit my grandmother and then come back. And so we did that my whole childhood. My dad's also like kind of not settled in one place so much. So we used to always spend time in the goldfields of Australia, fossicking and camping and moving about.
Yeah.
So the moving about kind of thing kind of always happened. So I got a career, and I did the whole like, I'm going to have a career and be in politics and work in an office and have a suit and be that sort of person, until I reached 25 and went, this is so not what I want to do. So first of all, I spent 2 years traveling through Asia, and then did like Russia, like the Trans-Siberian, long stints in China, and then went back, did some more work in Australia, and then went, I'm going to go to the UK and do my UK work visa thing, because I think we have a work visa before we turn 30 in order to get my 2 years work visa in the UK. And went via South America and said, cool, I'll just do the South America thing. It's called the Gringo Trail. You start in the north and you work south and you follow the Gringo Trail. So I went to Chile, Ecuador, and then Peru, and then on to Bolivia, Paraguay, and Brazil. And so I was in Brazil, and I'd probably spent 5 months in South America. And I loved it. I absolutely adored it. And I thought, I can go. I had this deadline to get to the UK for this visa. And I sort of went, just write to like a whole pile of English teaching schools across South America. So I did this one weekend, went to an internet, cabins, how you used to go to the old internet cabins and you send all your emails. Yep. And a school in Cusco said, if you can be here on Monday morning, we'll give you a job. And I was like in Brazil in the Pantanal. And so I like the best. It was a great adventure because, I took a motorbike to a military airport and then got the military plane into Bolivia and then like had 36 hours of buses and made it to Cusco for Monday morning.
Wow.
And then them going, it's just a training day or something stupid. Anyway. that was it.
Yeah.
So that's how I wouldn't say that there was a great deal of choice. If I chose, I wouldn't have probably chosen Cusco or even necessarily Peru. It was really a lottery of like how I ended up there. But I ended up there, and then very quickly I would go out. I should add that I'm not a hiker. So hiking wasn't a thing that I'd done very much of at all until that point. But on the weekends, we would go out with my Peruvian friends and we would follow these trails. And the thing that I couldn't believe, and I still can't believe, honestly, is that those trails are ancient Inca trails and everything connects you with everything else. And so you can explore the entire mountains and you don't see a single person. And so that really is what got me, is that you could be so far away from the tourist crowds in such a little amount of time and finding these amazing ruins that people knew about them, but no tourists knew about them. And that was it. I was hooked with the mountains and with Inca history and those kind of things.
And how long did you stay in Peru altogether?
Well, that was 2002.
Yeah.
Well, and I still have a daily relationship with Peru today. So we moved back here when I had my son. So that was my second child in 2013, was the permanent one child you can manage, I think, living in different places. 2 kids is like a whole step up.
Yeah.
Of difficulty. And I think, with my first child, my daughter, I'd had no scary things happen with her medical treatment, but even when you get a cold or something's wrong with your baby, you suddenly have a massive cultural things where you realize that you actually need to be in your own culture or your own way of dealing with issues. And so, I came back 6 weeks before my son was born, and that was it. So that's 12 years ago since I moved back to Australia.
But as you say, you have strong ties with Peru and you have your own company as well.
And that's why I've got my daily contact, because that's my income, I guess. And so every day I'm talking with Peru, emailing with Peru, and friendships and business colleagues, but always. So like there's rarely a day goes by where I'm not doing something to do with Peru.
And would you like to talk to us a little bit about your company and kind of who it's for, what tours and things that you do, and kind of I guess who you cater for, I guess is the kind of question.
Yeah. So its name's Apu. It's Apu's Peru Adventure Travel Specialists. Apus are the mountain gods. So the sacredness of the mountains is the Apus. So it's the Apus of Peru. It's the sacred mountains of Peru. My business partner is a lady named Feli Cayenalpa Gonzalez. She's a Peruvian woman, or an Andean Quechua woman. And when we formed the company, which was back in 2008, we were like one of the only women-owned companies in a very machista, which is a macho society. It still is it's a very macho society where women don't run companies. Especially not in tourism. So we were quite out there when we did that. So when we started the company, it was really it was kind of funny because I was like, oh, yeah, there's this new thing called the internet and I'll create a website and we'll sell tours on that website. But, of course, it seems so funny, and I'm sure you're also at an age when that was really innovative. And, of course, now 20 years later, it's not at all innovative, but our market was always selling to people online rather than selling people face-to-face. And my first iteration of my website was, I'm going to offer things that no one else offers in the entire world. That's it. It's going to be so out there. It's going to be so innovative. And it's really going to connect people with the real Peru. And we sold nothing. Nothing. Second iteration was more touristic, had more offerings. And now our most common offering is the Inca Trail Machu Picchu. So we're very, we're quite mainstream now, but we also maintain kind of a secondary offering, which is for people who want to experience more authentic Peru than the typical tourist offering. And I also like to say that the company's evolved as I've evolved, changed, matured, that's the word. So, when I started it, I was really hardcore, very, I wouldn't spend any extra money, a real backpacker. And then, I had children. And so then you become much more interested in safety. And of course, I am from Australia. So I think safety was probably always the thing that we used to do. And also we are very interested in not exploiting people, protecting the environment. So it's matured. So now I actually think the company's it's kind of, for me, in my 50s. So I'm going to turn 50 this year. But I mean, I had children late, so my youngest is 6. So I'm still very much in my parenting stage. But yeah, so we create things that are more for me in my current age range, and I have an understanding, obviously, of what people are looking for. So I think I still create things that are for people like me in my age range.
So, what about family travel to Peru and solo female travelers, or you kind of cater for all of those kind of groups of travelers?
We're very bespoke and boutique, so we can cater for anybody wanting anything. And that's where a lot of our strength comes in, because we create things that people want individually. We do quite a lot of family travel, and I always have a strong hand in organising that to make sure that the family isn't over-committed. Solo women travellers, we don't deal with that a lot because we mostly offer private packages. So pre-pandemic, we did work with a couple of companies in the US, which were like women travellers. But no, we don't have like a solo women traveller thing happening. But if a group of solo women traveller wanted to get together, we can do it.
That's what I was going to ask, actually. That kind of was going to lead it into that. If we had a group of 5 or 6, I mean, how many, what's your kind of maximum size group?
Well, this is the whole thing. We're not about big numbers. So we offer a lot of our clients are 2 people. So two or 3 people, a couple who have in their more mature years realised that they don't want to they want to go on holiday and relax. So they actually just want to go away into the mountains and just have the 2 of them. And so you'd be surprised at the number of people that just book for 2 or 4 people, 2 lots of best friends. So our minimum number's 2. Our maximum trekking groups, like between 8 and 12. Like, we can obviously cater for larger groups, but we don't like to, because it really takes away from the experience that we try to offer, which is authentic and personal.
Yeah. Sounds really good. And I will put a link to your company in the show notes as well. So let's kick in and let's talk about Peru. I literally, no, it was great to talk about that. It's really good to know. I literally know very little about Peru. Obviously, the first thing that comes into mind when I think about Peru is Incas and Machu Picchu. That's about it. So what would be the key things that you, or I should know, or anybody listening to this podcast who's planning to visit Peru for the first time, what are the key things that they should know?
Well, obviously, they're going to want to visit Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
But Machu Picchu is an isolated place in the middle of the mountains. And to focus on Machu Picchu is kind of just like seeing one thing in the middle of Europe when there's a whole lot of attractions around. Everything, like, you can go to Peru for 4 or 5 days and hit a number of bucket list items, but it's also quite an expensive airfare. So most people, I think, try to spend 8 to 10 days at a minimum. 14 days is better if they can, because I guess as I've aged, I'm more careful around my body. Most people fly into Lima, and I say stay a night in Lima, or 2 nights if you can, get your sea legs. It's a really fascinating city. It's very different than Cusco, which would be your next port of call. Lima's like the culinary capital of the South America. It's got a lot of, for Americans particularly, a lot of famous chefs who have got television programs in America. So they're quite famous. So go and experience the food. And Lima has a Latino culture, so it's sort of more Spanish. Whereas when you get to the Andes, it's Andean culture. It's a really distinct completely different culture. So, I would say you've got to see just a night or two in Lima, and that's also really good for your body after a long flight. You'll then fly up to Cusco. As you fly into Cusco, it's 3,400 meters. That's like 14,000 feet, 13,000 feet, I think.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I work in meters as well. That's all right. I work
Good.
in meters.
Right, good. Yeah, we're good.
I'm good on meters.
3,400 meters. So that's
High.
like really, really high.
High. I was going to say it's really, really high.
Yeah. Like one of the highest cities in the world with an airport of that size. So the first thing that you struggle with is it hits you, like the altitude hits you. And I seriously don't believe that when people say, oh, it didn't affect me. And I'm like, you can hardly breathe when you get there because there's little oxygen in the air. So Cusco was the capital of the Inca Empire. So it really merits 2 or 3 days in its own right. It's completely charming. It's got lots of cobblestone streets. Basically, when the Spanish conquered Peru, they found that the Incas had built these really amazing foundations, and that the foundations are earthquake-proof. So they raised the top of the buildings and they built the Spanish churches and the Spanish houses on top of the Inca foundations. So you literally have the bottom part of the city is Incan and the top part is sort of colonial Spanish, so very charming and attractive. And it's got amazing restaurants, it's extremely cosmopolitan, but yet it is still highly Andean. So people wearing their traditional dress, bringing their fruits and veggies to the market, they're wandering down the street. Yeah, that's Cusco. From Cusco, if you were to go directly to Machu Picchu, you're looking at about 4 hours travel. It's not nothing. It's like if you were to take a car and then the train, you'd be like looking at 4 hours travel. To get from Cusco to Machu Picchu, you're going to go through this sacred valley of the Incas. So romantically named, it's sacred, it's beautiful. It's a lower altitude valley in the middle of the Andes. So growing all this amazing vegetation, flowers, birds. It's where the Incan people naturally cultivated their crops. So there's lots of crops. So it's sacred and it's beautiful. So to not stop there is really a shame if you don't.
Yeah.
And there's also Incan ruins and things to explore there. So you go from Cusco to the Sacred Valley and then on to Machu Picchu. If you've only got 5 days, you kind of do an express version. If you've got 10 days, you can do the whole thing but more slowly and actually appreciate some of the intricacies of the culture and really learn about why it's so special and how it's so special. And they're the top things if you've got like 5 or 10 days. The rest of Peru, like there's the Amazon jungle. I could talk, for ages about the Amazon jungle. Lake Titicaca, with the highest navigable lake in the world, really iconic looking. You have Arequipa, which is a white city made out of like white sillar rock and has beautiful Spanish architecture, so lovely, really attractive place to wander around. And then the Colca Canyon, which is like as deep as the Grand Canyon and has condors flying about.
Wow.
And the thing about, so like there's so much to do and see.
And it's a big country as well. I think that's the thing as well. It's like, it's huge. Is it about the 3rd largest in South America, Peru?
Yeah, probably 3rd or 4th, I suppose. After, but it's massive. And it's got like the coastal strip, the mountains, and then the jungle. And within that, I don't know how many different ethnic groups and stuff like that, but there's an enormous diversity in ethnic groups where they dress differently from town to town and place to place in these colourful cultural dress, which identifies who they are. And so like that from a photographic point of view is stunning.
So it sounds there's so much to do and see in Peru. So you've given us. I mean, wow. I kind of knew that there was obviously more than Machu Picchu, but just talking to you, I'm like going. I need to go for a month by the sounds of it, at least. What's the best way to plan an itinerary? Obviously, you've given us a good idea there for kind of like that 8 to 10 days if you're going to do the kind of Lima, Cusco, and then onto Machu Picchu. But where would you say for people to go when they want to start planning an itinerary? Obviously, kind of you have a huge amount of knowledge, which you're sharing with us. I assume you've got a website with information as well that we can access. But I guess that local knowledge is pretty invaluable, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I suppose it all depends on what type of travel people want to do. There's some, there's some good UK companies that offer quality package tours. I always would say look for a smaller company that has at a minimum an environmental policy, a social policy. These days, some of it's greenwashing, but I know there's some good UK companies, and there's some there's good companies around the world. But I mean, your first port of call is to travel ethically and responsibly. So that would be a place that I would say is because the exploitation in Peru is there's enormous amounts of exploitation, and so by putting our money where we support people that are socially responsible, we give the message that a lot of the really large companies that offer cheap trips need to step up, but that's going to take a lot of time and education. So you can go with a UK, US-based company, but they will then be always dealing with a middleman. So if you can find a Peruvian-based company, then your money goes directly into Peru, so you're not dealing with a middleman. If you're a confident, independent traveller, there's lots of companies. Yeah, that's the thing. Is if you're
to ask, because you've got the company option, but if you're an independent traveller, I think right, okay, I'm used to travel around. I guess describe myself here, travel around the world independently, but I still feel a little bit intimidated when it comes to putting together an itinerary for Peru in terms of, how to start with it, what to know. And I know one thing you mentioned is about the starting lower and go to higher altitude, because it's a very important thing to consider.
Yes, exactly. So if you're an independent traveller, first of all, I can tell you that Peru's really well organised for independent travel. So, and it's also very economical for the independent traveller who is capable of organising their own travel. So, I would definitely, everybody will most likely you'll fly into Lima. So, you're starting low. And so, one of the things that hits a lot of people is altitude. And if they're a slow traveller and they're moving along the coast and then they start moving up through the mountains, they won't have problems with altitude because they're allowing their body the healthy and natural way to acclimatise. And so that would definitely be how I would plan it, is working low to high. I mean, I personally, when I'm going to a destination I don't know, I get package tours and I copy them or at least study them. And go, oh, look where they went, and that's how I want to do it and stuff. So that's in the olden days, you used to get the glossy magazines.
Yes,
and you used to work through them, and but obviously you don't need that now. But that's how I would do it if you're an independent traveller. Get the glossy magazine if they still have it, or go online and see what companies are offering, low to high. If you had extra time, I would highly recommend doing a week's worth of Spanish, because Spanish is not a difficult language to learn. So I'm told, and a little bit of Spanish also gets you a long way. And you get that immersive experience. You should do there's a lot of Spanish schools in Cusco. You can get some language in, do some activities, immerse yourself, and then go off and travel.
That sounds great. I love that. I like learning languages wherever I go to. It's always something that I always say to people: learn at least the key phrases, because it's just polite, just really to be able to communicate at least in some of the thank you, hello, please, whatever, those kind of key phrases, and learn a little bit about the culture as well, so you don't kind of make any of those kind of cultural faux pas. But I was kind of going to ask you what would be the kind of biggest mistake that you see people making, and would it be the kind of moving too fast and kind of the altitude sickness kicking in?
Yeah, always not taking altitude seriously. Kind of makes me smile a little bit when people go, oh, and I don't get affected by altitude, or I've been in Colorado at 2,000 feet, I'm acclimatized, and I'm like, nah. We don't say, we say them as so, I constantly see people affected by altitude. The range of affection can be change. So some people will get headaches. Some people will vomit, like, you're on a Sacred Valley tour and there's like 3 people vomiting on the side of the road, and you think, oh, if they had have just taken an extra day to rest, they wouldn't be having this awful experience.
Mm.
And obviously there's also really bad altitude sickness where people have to evacuate. We don't see that much. It's more that they just have a couple of days with shocking headaches and vomiting, and it's just
and not a great way
it.
to start your holiday. No, absolutely
No.
not. So taking that seriously and adding that extra time in sounds like absolutely the number one tip. How do I get around Peru? We get asked that all the time. So I'm a UK travel specialist, so it's pretty easy in the UK. I can go, well, you can get the train or you can hire a car. But Peru, how do I get around?
It depends how much money you have.
Right, okay.
So, really, it honestly means what's your budget and how much available time do you have? Because, for example, if you don't have a budget and you have plenty of time, it takes 24 hours-ish to travel from Lima to Cusco, and it'll cost you probably $30 or $40. And if you fly, it's a 1-hour flight, and it'll cost you $150, and you're there. So that's the first thing is that Peru does have a pretty efficient bus system, and it's cheap. It does have some accidents, but probably not. Or, about the same as everywhere else in South America.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have any budget, then you can get around comfortably. They've also now got hop-on, hop-off buses, which are also designed for foreigners or economic travelers to get on in Lima. They get off in Arequipa. They join that same bus. So you're not actually going on public transport where you're going to possibly you don't get robbed that often anymore, but there's always those risks. So they're a higher quality sort of bus. You meet like-minded foreign travellers on the bus. Yeah, so that's called Peru Hop. We have them in Australia too, hop-on, hop-off travellers buses.
Yeah.
So there's those sort of options. There's public transport, and then there's flying, which in such a big country can obviously speed up your holiday a lot. It costs more, but then, $50 versus $150, it depends how you value your money and your time.
Oh, I'm a bit of a if I can avoid getting on a plane, I will. I'm happy to, and also you see a bit more. I just think you just see, like when you're on an airplane, you don't see that much, but when you're on a bus or a train, you get a chance to like see a bit more of the countryside. That's kind of always my thoughts.
And they've got sleeper buses too, which is you save money. So you sleep on the bus. It's a 24-hour bus, and when I say 24-hour-ish, there's issues. They can take 30 hours or 22 hours. It just all depends.
Yeah, so I guess it's as you say, it's kind of looking at your travel style and your budget and your time, and kind of figuring out which way is the best way for you to get around, and then choose. But it's good to know that there are things like those hop-on buses that you can do, obviously flights and things like that. So what about I know there's a train. I've heard about this train to Machu. Now I'm not a hiker. I'm going to say you mentioned that before. I am definitely not a hiker. I got to 55 and I got to the point where I said, I'm not going to lie anymore about things that I don't like doing. So I don't like any sport whatsoever. That's my first one, which my husband finds absolutely appalling, and my daughter. But I also don't hike. I very rarely hike. I did a hike in New Zealand last year, which I absolutely loved. And I went, oh, maybe I do like hiking. But generally, I don't. So if I wanted to go, I'm kind of going to just switch back because of the transport thing as well. If I want to go to Machu Picchu, which obviously I will want to do, can I get there without doing any hiking whatsoever, or will I be expected to do some kind of hiking?
No, you can absolutely get there without hiking. And the vast majority of people go there without hiking. It's a misconception that you have to hike the Inca Trail to get there. In fact, only 200 people depart each day on the hike when there's like 2,000 tickets a day to Machu Picchu. So it's a misconception that it's a hike. So, there's a famous train, which is the train to Machu Picchu. These days, usually doesn't run from Cusco to Machu Picchu. It just runs from the town of Ollantaytambo, which is a little town in the Sacred Valley. For logistical reasons, they've changed that. So it's an hour and a half trip. It's absolutely spectacular. It's got different ranges of categories. So they've also got they've got a standard train and they've got a middle class train, and then they've got a super luxurious $500 return with
Wow.
waiters and gourmet meals and things like
Very
that.
posh.
Very posh. And so that particular train company does very posh really well. They have a very elegant luxury train that also runs to Lake Titicaca. So they do that very well. But it's the one that runs to Lake Titicaca, I think, is one of the greatest train journeys in the world. You'll hear those kind of things thrown around.
Yeah.
So no, you don't have to hike. And then if somebody does want to hike, there's a 4-day option, and then there's just a 1-day hike option. So there's possibilities there.
Yeah, you can choose based on how fit you are as well, and how, all those sorts of things, considerations. I was going to ask as well, I know I sent you some questions beforehand and I didn't add this one in, but I was thinking about it. Is there like a better time of year, I'll put that in, a better time of year to visit Peru, or a time to kind of avoid?
It depends on you. The best time of the year to visit is the dry season, which starts in May and runs through to end of August loosely, which corresponds with the Northern Hemisphere summer. So it's the busiest time of year. It's very, very full. There's tourists from all around Europe and North America. Everything tends to be booked out. The days are sunny and dry. The nights are very cold, below zero, but it's considered the best time of the year. There's also a lot of really good festivals then. So it's very colourful. But if you're more interested in, low season travel, the rain starts in September, but September and October are really good shoulder months, in my opinion. Not too much rain, nice amount of sunshine, and not that hectic, super high season feel. November through February, low season. So you will encounter rain every day in the afternoons, which isn't too bad if you're not trekking. You can get out of the rain. It's mostly, it's more Latin American travellers than North American and European people.
Mm-hmm.
Prices can be better. So, yeah, it all depends what kind of traveller you are, because a lot of people if you're like a bucket list traveller that needs the perfect weather, then June through August is the time to go. It's the best time of the year. But, I love Christmas, those months, because it's green. So the dry season is it's just dry. It's arid. It's brown, blue skies, brown mountains. In the middle of the wet season, it's vibrant green. Everything's growing, but, it's sort of cloudy skies. And so
that sounds good. That's good to know. Because I know that's kind of a common question that we get, is there a time I should go somewhere or avoid going somewhere? And it's good to always have those considerations. Now, I kind of touched on it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so my recommendations for the very best months are sort of late March, April, avoid Easter like the plague. And then September, October are really good months, in my opinion. Yeah, so definitely avoid Easter, and also avoid the end of July, which is the Fiestas Patrias, the Independence Day, when national tourists are travelling. It's just chaotic.
I could imagine, extremely busy.
Well, it is here in Australia. It's insane at Easter and Christmas. I'm sure it is
exactly
worldwide.
Same in London. If I say London, if people are going to visit London, I'm going to go. Well, if you're going to visit Easter, you're going to visit Christmas. You have to. It's going to be even crazier busy than it normally is, because all the Brits are also travelling then as well. We also go to London. We kind of briefly touched on it before, but things like cultural norms or etiquette, things that are useful to know, because for a lot of people it's going to be a completely different culture that they're not used to. So what sort of things are useful to know before you go?
I think overall Peruvian people are fairly open-minded about most things, and they've certainly been changing a lot in the last 20 years. So, I don't think there's a lot that you can do to really offend them, or at least the ones that work in tourism are pretty open-minded. You should always carry your own toilet paper. That's a tip.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't always have toilet paper. Well, they don't have toilet paper in toilets. And sometimes you can pay money outside the toilet and get a piece of toilet paper. Maybe you can't. And the other thing is to not be offended if they kind of lie to you or agree with you. So you might say something like, is this the way to the Fred's restaurant? And they go, yes, 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 this is the way to Fred's restaurant. But it's not the way to Fred's restaurant because they don't want to disagree with you.
Right.
That's sort of so the truth is flexible. Oh, time's flexible too. They're really not good at time. But again, I think the tourism industry's developed a lot. Like since I first arrived in Peru, they're really understanding now that you can't arrive late when you have. I mean, at least in my company too, we work really hard on those things. You can't be late.
Yeah.
You need to say you are there at the time you are there. But yeah, it's a strongly Catholic country, so I think I would avoid some of any topics that are contentious with Catholic people.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, but even then, I think people are quite open-minded these days.
Cool. And obviously learning a few words at the least of Spanish is really useful. As I said before, it's always a good thing to do to prepare yourself.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that the second language in Peru, or the main language, is Quechua, which is the language of the Incas. So not in Lima, but in Cusco, a lot of people speak Quechua. And until recently, they were really looked down upon. It was not a celebrated thing. It was a sign of being a lower class or a less educated person if you spoke the Indigenous language. As with Indigenous cultures across the world, they've struggled with their identity. And so it's only really recently that they're very proud of speaking Quechua and will do it openly in public. So if you learn a few words of Quechua, you'd be particularly popular. And I mean, there's a cultural one. So when my company works, we do seek out Quechua-speaking people because all of our field team on our treks and our hikes are Quechua-speaking, and women are still often monolingual, so they only speak Quechua instead of Quechua and Spanish. Men are pretty much all bilingual because they've been sent to school, whereas the girls weren't sent to school. Again, that's changing. So these days, 30-year-old women were educated, but 50-year-old women weren't educated. So, you have that mix. So we actively employ Quechua-speaking people. And so we have porters on our Inca Trail. And so the people really want to sit with them and talk with them. And we're like, yeah, but they don't necessarily want to sit and talk with you. They're very closed kind of in their culture, and it's not that they don't want to, they're not being rude, they just like to be with their own people. And so it's I think it's really difficult when you're in an Indigenous culture that has been conquered and then put down over hundreds of years. So they like to hang out with their own groups, and people are like, oh, but I want to talk with my porters, I want to sit with them, and I'm like, yeah, they don't really.
They don't want to,
yeah.
You have to have that respect for what they want at the end of the day.
That's
don't
right.
you?
It's not what we want.
No, exactly. It's having that sensitivity to that. I'm going to slightly pivot towards food and drink, because I always I like my food and like my drink. That sounds wrong when I say it like that. But what should I try when I go to Peru?
Well, Peru now has this amazing culinary renaissance where they've come out and they've got all these famous chefs where they're doing really, really amazing stuff with Peruvian cuisine. One of the dishes that you must try if you're in Lima is ceviche, which is raw fish. It's not cooked in lemon, but that's how you what's the word? It's like
marinate it.
marinated in Yemen. Yeah. So ceviche in Lima is really good. They make a nice ceviche in Cusco, but it's better in Lima. The pisco, you can try pisco, which is, Peruvian brandy, I believe, or like a derivative of brandy. But it's also Chile. Chile also claims pisco, so you can't say it's just Peruvian. So don't break that faux pas. For everybody, there's Inca Cola, which is this bright, vibrant, fluorescent yellow soft drink, which you've got to try because it's like so insanely sweet, bubblegum like, but really funny to drink. So do try Inca Cola. And the controversial one is, of course, guinea pig. So cuy is an Andean delicacy, and they bring out guinea pig on all the special occasions. And so you can eat it in restaurants where it's without its head and feet, which is a more palatable way of eating it. But how they eat it in their homes is with the feet and head and everything. It's obviously not for everybody. It's quite a gamey taste, but it's certainly something that you must try if you're into that kind of thing. And, of course, potatoes. Don't forget the potatoes.
Yes. I have to tell you, I absolutely love potatoes. I was so excited when I read about how many varieties of potato they have. I was like, wow.
Yeah, they have so many different varieties of potatoes.
Wow. Amazing. I was like, and different colours and different, I looked at a photo, I don't know if it was on your Instagram, on your website, and I was like, wow, that's just incredible. And I guess they've all got subtle differences in flavour.
Yes, yeah, and it's still, so that's when you go to these gourmet restaurants and things like that. Now they're really good at talking about the different flavours because, when we're from a culture or somebody is from a culture, they don't recognise it. So I lived in Peruvian households for, a long time, and I didn't realise what I was eating because you just ate it. And not until you go to a gourmet restaurant and they split them out and they go, oh, this is this and this. And you're like, oh, wow, it's really unique.
Classic. So are there's a specific way that they prepare the potatoes? Like, I think, roast, mash, jacket potatoes, or just a variety of ways, or is that kind of like a speciality way of doing it?
Well, this is also where it's difficult because the really typical ways of eating the potatoes in the high mountains with the indigenous people is not particularly palatable to Western taste. So there's two ways that they prepare them in the indigenous communities. One is that they freeze dry them when the frosts are coming down. And so those particular potatoes are really not palatable to us, and they carry them in their bags. And then the other way they just boil them in their jackets, and then they peel them as a way of hygiene. So you'll meet an Indigenous lady when you're walking in the mountains, and she'll they carry a manta around their shoulders, and she'll pull it out and she'll offer you some hot potatoes, and that's how they eat them. So that's the most traditional way of eating potatoes. It's just boiled potatoes. But that's where I'm saying I didn't really have the appreciation until I went to gourmet restaurants where they were able to jazz them up a bit.
Yeah. Do many different things with them.
Yes.
Right. Now, I always end the podcast with the same question, so I know listeners are going to expect it. And I kind of know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the one tip that you would share with anybody visiting or planning a visit to Peru for the first time?
Yeah, you did guess it. It's take the altitude seriously. And my second tip would be don't jam it all in. Allow time and discover what a unique culture it is.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm very excited I'm not sure when I'm going to get over there, but it's definitely on my can't wait to go to list at some point. Thanks so much for coming on and chatting to us about Peru. It's been brilliant to chat to you today, Ariana. I meet you for the first time. I've actually first time we've met today, so it was lovely to meet you and chat. And we'll share links in the episode show notes to your company and to your website, and obviously social media channels and everything like that. So if you want to find out more about Ariana and her company and about Peru, do check out the show notes. But thanks so much for coming on today, Ariana.
Oh, look, thank you for inviting me, and I hope that it was helpful, and message me if you've got more questions. I don't know.
Oh, perfect. Well, we actually have a new thing called SpeakPipe where people can actually leave a voice message if they have a particular question or something they want to know. So I'll let you know if we hear anything back from anybody. So if you listen to the episode and thinking, I've got something specifically I'd love to know about, then I can pass that on to Ariana and hopefully get back to you with anything you want to know. Or obviously you can email Ariana. The information will be in the show notes and on your website. So we can definitely sort that out. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favourite podcast app because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.